Welcome to our series on the connected enterprise and the new work model. I'm really excited to have our guest here today, Josh Bersin. Many of you probably know who Josh is, but he's been a leading analyst in the HR and talent industry for quite a few years. And really excited to have him talk about, kind of what's going on in the world and what's going to happen next. Because he obviously thinks about it, writes about it, and has seen a lot over the last 20 years or so. So welcome, Josh. Hope you're doing well in these crazy times.
Thank you, Keith. Nice to see you again. We go way back.
Yes.
Generations ago.
now we're telling a little bit too much to the audience, I think.
Right.
But yes, we saw the early days of online learning all the way through the transformations around HR. So I'm really excited to hear about some of the thoughts that you have and what you're seeing out in the market, because I think a lot of the audience would really like to start thinking about what's next.
Right. Yeah.
And so if we start with from a high level, what do you think are some of the biggest changes and implications as we start to think about getting past COVID-19? Or I don't know when we're going to be past it, but as we start to, really kind of open up and get back to work.
Well, I would take a little bit of a step back first. While this seemed like it was a big surprise, we actually had a lot of things on the precipice right before this. So if I go back to the last 11 years of economic growth and the issues that companies were facing right up until January and early February, we had very low unemployment rate, tight labor market, future of work, reskilling, tremendous focus on digital transformation, yet low productivity, difficult creating an integrated employee experience, high degree of stress and anxiety at work. All this was happening, and standard of living were not keeping up with the cost of living. All this was happening while the stock market was at a very high level in January, and it had been going on for 11 or 12 years. So my sense is we were in a very high stress end of the economic cycle already, and boom, the pandemic hits. Now, nobody could have predicted that would have been the straw that broke the camel's back, but obviously it was. And so now we're in what I call the big reset. We're resetting a lot of things about our work experiences, about life, and about business. We're resetting the way we work. Most of you know we were getting closer and closer and closer together in our offices. All of the buildings were getting more and more tight. The restaurants were closer together. The cars were closer together. Now we're getting spread out. We're working from home. We're learning a lot more about sanitized, safe protocols for work. It turns out the pandemic is not a black swan event that will happen once in our lifetime. It will probably happen more than once. Even Bill Gates has talked a lot about the fact that this pandemic is the warm-up for more of these types of activities. Mm-hmm. And so, the world of work's changed. Obviously, we are rethinking the job roles in companies because of the way we're transforming our businesses to adapt to customer needs. The second thing that's changing is there's an enormous refocus on empathy. I like to call it CEO as chief empathy officer. For those of us that have been in HR all this time, we've always thought this way, but it kind of ebbs and flows based on the economic cycle. Right now, business executives realize that if they don't listen, communicate, give authentic, reliable information, their people won't come back to work. They won't feel safe. They won't be productive. So that's been a huge reset. There's been a reset in budgets. Some companies are growing and some companies are going crazy trying to sell what they offer. Some companies are just having dramatic transformations of their business models, obviously in transportation or the entertainment business, and you had theme parks or hotels or hospitality. Those companies are going through massive transformations, trying to figure out how to digitize their products and services. And then there's a transformation in the role of trust. People are now realizing that if I don't trust my workplace, if I don't trust the safety and cleanliness of the products and services I buy, I can't go to market. It was interesting that United Airlines just announced a relationship with Clorox and the Cleveland Clinic, which to me is to some degree a trust issue. It's not, obviously there's going to be all sorts of protocols in the airplanes. And then the final thing is that HR which, has constantly struggled to have a seat at the table, is now the heroes. And not only are HR professionals involved in all of these new protocols and work practices and work at home issues, but HR, facilities, IT, health and safety, and legal are now getting bonded together to deal with the transformation of businesses in this pandemic. And I also think that this is not a recession, this is a transformation. We're having a very, very rapidly forced business transformation, one that we didn't have time to talk about. We didn't have time to write research articles on. We're doing it in real time. And I think the job market will transform and the economy will come back, relatively well over the next year or so. So it isn't just a big, financial downturn in and of itself. It's a lot of jobs and companies changing. And what's been inspirational to me in all of the conversations I've had, and I've had a lot of them, is that companies are really coming together and responding in ways that they never realized they could before. They're getting projects done in days and weeks that would have taken months and years. They're working together in cross-functional teams. The CEO and the CFO and the CIO are suddenly making themselves available to redeploy resources immediately in different areas. We're using a lot of the data and HR tech that we've had now in ways that we didn't realize we needed it. So all of that has happened in the last 90 days.
Okay.
A lot.
That is a lot. I mean, you touched on so many things. It's one point that you made here at the end, which is I think a lot of people, companies, leaders, and employees now realize what's possible. Like if you would have told me that we're going to go 100% remote overnight, I would have said, no way. We need months to plan it. But guess what?
Right.
We did. And that's just a small example of, I think, people recognizing what's possible. But you covered so many different things around that transformation. I think that's really the backdrop, which is it's changing so many things so fast. But I wanted to break it up a little bit as I kind of think through some of the things you talked about. And you talked about CEO empathy. You've talked about trust. And for me, that's kind of changing it from kind of an employee-centric view of the employee and who they are and what they need. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, this is a little bit of motherhood and apple pie for HR people, but now it's very clear to everybody. If in most, first of all, 85 to 90% of the jobs in the developed countries, US included, are service-related jobs. So only 7.5% of the US workers are in manufacturing industries, and of them, only less than that actually do sort of manufacturing work. So everybody in the company is a service worker in some respect. And so their sense of trust, safety, health, capabilities, skills is basically what your company is all about. And so CEOs are now realizing that if the people aren't supported and empowered and protected in a way and cared for, we don't have a company. Our products and services don't exist without those people. Now, we had a lot of discussion right before this about AI and robotics, and maybe we won't need all these people and all these jobs will go away. That didn't happen. Actually, the economy became more service oriented during the digital transformation era. So that's the big wake up call for CEOs, and I think they understand that. I mean, CEOs are very, very agile and intelligent people. So they're bending over backwards, doing amazing things for people. I had a company the other day say to me, big insurance company, global insurance company, for 20 years, we've been trying to get transparency into our culture. We haven't been able to do it. We just did it in 2 weeks. Everybody is talking about everything now that they never wanted to talk about before. So I think it's kind of a refreshing wake up call.
When you think about that, obviously I think there's been a big realization for people around the importance of this, as you've talked about. Do you think it wasn't important in the past, or like, what do you think is?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely, it's not always important. I mean, there's companies, and I don't have to mention names, that would, basically prefer to make more money than to take care of the people. And the people, it's a question of whether you are in a business cycle. What happens to most companies is during a growth cycle, when things are going well, you tend to think about the people a little bit less, and you think about your competitors, your stock price, the financial drivers of your business, your market, and your people are usually reasonably happy because they're part of the growth cycle and they're experiencing the growth in their earnings and their stock and their various benefits. And you're not thinking about the people as much. As soon as there's a crisis of some kind, your competitor steps into your market, you have a bad quarter, you have a big failure of some kind, maybe a product fails. Look at what Boeing just went through. All of a sudden you start getting under the covers and say, wow, we got some people problems here. We have some compliance and training problems. We have some retention problems. We have some management problems, whatever it may be. So companies go through these cycles of being heavily focused on the people and culture, and then sometimes less. Right now, everybody is focused on it. I think that's the right way to be, all the time. But I do see companies go through these cycles, and you see that in the Glassdoor ratings and all of the various culture surveys that people do in the engagement ratings. Employee engagement, which is been going on for decades, every time the big data sets come out from Gallup or Towers Watson, whoever it is, there's about 30 to 35% of the workforce that says, I'm disengaged or actively disengaged. It's almost always about a third. So what my conclusion of that is, of all the companies in the world, there's about a third of them that aren't thinking about their employees quite enough. Now that third shifts around all the time, but so now everybody's sort of thinking about that because it's life or death for your business.
And so, that kind of leads to one of your points, which is really HR getting a seat at the table, right? Like, as companies start to face different situations, when you think about HR and the seat at the table, when you think about the top couple of things that are going to change in these HR organizations or the HR leaders as they become people at the seat of the table, and I think some organizations would say they already had a seat at the table, but as more companies do that, what do you think is that's going to impact for that organization and HR? Like, what are the top couple things they're going to really focus on?
Well, I think the HR profession is some of the most inspiring, hardworking, committed, caring people in business. So most of the people I know in HR are stepping right up immediately, and they're thrilled to have the opportunity. If you're in a sort of a more compliance administrative, less strategic HR professional, you can't really operate that way anymore. You have been asked to step into a situation that is going to force you to act. And every HR person I've talked to has stepped up. They're taking on a heroic role in their companies. They don't know we don't know all the answers. We don't even know how this virus works yet. We don't know who's infected. We don't know how people get infected. We're not exactly clear on all of the protocols we need to prevent people from getting it. How strict should your rules be on masks and social distancing at work? All of that's being worked out. And so the HR teams and the HR leaders and the HR professionals all around the world are suddenly scrambling to build best practices and talk to each other. There's a lot of collaboration going on. So this is an inspirational time to be in the HR profession. I think most HR people are a little tired of the energy they have to put into it, but they're up for the task. Eventually they're going to get worn out. There's also a lot of HR transformation going on. Companies, about 40 to 50% of companies are changing the roles and structures and operating models of HR on a regular basis. I think that's peaked up where a lot of companies are saying, we need people in these types of roles that we didn't have before. So let's move things around quickly because we have to. Yeah. And I think, that's a muscle that HR departments are beginning to now redevelop to be more agile. And this, the agile word, which is a big word in engineering and design, is sort of been creeping into HR, and now it just landed in HR. So HR is becoming very agile and very capable of doing things in days that used to take weeks or months. So all of those things are happening.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because, right, obviously there's a part of HR that's a lot of process orientation, and you don't think of it being agile. But when you're in such an uncertain environment, you talk about, you go to work and you have these policies, and then guess what? They find out that social distancing might need to change, or you have a second wave. And so that whole concept of being agile, like you said, is in engineering, but is starting to call into to other places. Um, the other one's the area that I know you write and think and talk a lot about is you mentioned engagement and experience.
Hmm.
And at the
Yeah.
beginning you said, okay, well, we were closing in together and
Yeah.
now we realize, ooh, maybe we have to spread apart a little bit. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you think about when you think about how are organizations going to create, connection in an organization when there's obviously going to be more remote workers, there's going to be
Right.
more
Yeah.
distance. The shared kitchen environment may be different.
Yeah. Right. The
How do you think about
bathrooms,
them?
the elevator, everything.
Yeah.
Well, the employee experience initiative and the employee experience concept is now, come home. And the way I really think people are framing it now is resilience. Resilience is a very hot word at the moment, and because it kind of connotes both the agility part of business and also the sustainability part. What we have going on right now is we have to simplify and um, make the employee experience safe. So we have the protocols and the practices of distancing and cleaning the workplace and identifying practices for infection reporting and taking care of quarantines and all that. And we also have this issue of keeping people um, healthy, well, and mentally and physically and psychologically capable of working at the pace we're working. Most people are working a lot more hours. Those people that haven't been laid off, the 70 to 75% of us that haven't been laid off are working a lot of extra hours. Working at home is actually a lot more hours than working in the office. You don't get any breaks. There's no commute time. You're just kind of always there. There's the issues of psychological safety. If I don't want to come into the office, am I going to be penalized? If I can't show up for this meeting because my children are home and I'm trying to teach them, am I going to, get dinged for that? That's a big issue. And companies are relaxing a lot. They're getting a lot more flexible now with the expectations on people because they know people are going to get their work done in a slightly different way. And that's a new part of the employee experience. And then there's the issue of what you guys do, which is communications. We just did a series of pulse surveys the last 4 or 5 weeks. And the latest one, that the biggest trend in organizations now is constant communications, both directions. What's going on in the company? What's the perspective of the CEO? What offices are we opening? What offices are we not opening? What's the rules for coming to work? How do I schedule time? Am I going to have the same desk? What are we paying for versus what are we not paying for? Do I get a sabbatical? What should I do about my vacation pay? How about my performance management goals? There's a lot of communication going on now daily, stand-up meetings, open video conferences, and there have to be policies too. I mean, as much as we maybe don't want to have a lot of policies, people want to know when I go to work, what is the guarantee that it will be safe for me to go? Is everybody going to wear a mask or is it going to be optional? Are we going to get tested before we go into the office? And if so, what happens to people who have flu symptoms? I mean, there's actually some rules that need to be established as well. We're finding out in a lot of the conversations we're having is this isn't a time to throw all the rule books away and just say we have a bunch of guidelines. People want to know that the company is taking the response to the coronavirus seriously and in a competent way. So we've got to communicate all that. And then we need communications back from people too. What isn't working? What are the stresses you're facing? What level of anxiety are you dealing with, and what can the company do to make that better? So the communication systems like what you guys have built are really becoming instrumental in the relationship between employees. And that's all part of the employee experience work that we've been working on for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, the one thing that you mentioned that I think is the challenge of this situation is there's so much to communicate, right? Because there's so much change as you went through, and I think that the first step is okay. I'm going to communicate that. Well, it's okay because every employee is focused on and hungry for information around what's happening in the crisis. But then you take a step back and realize now your employee is overwhelmed because in remote work, collaboration
Right.
tools are being bombarded that weren't at there before, the communications, and then it just becomes this as more digital. Like digital systems love to notify you. And all of a sudden you have this backdrop of noise. And that's one of the things for us that I think, we're starting to see organizations really start to think about, which is, okay, it can't be just one communication because that employee experience is going to be terrible. So how are, they're going to think about doing that and measuring it and things, what are some things you see out there?
Well, I mean, this is where what you guys have done is so important. I think you've thought this through a lot more than most companies have. I think what most companies are doing is the basics: emails, conference calls, video conferences, websites, portals, surveys, all of the stuff that, vendors have been building out for the last couple of years is now being used. But a more integrated communication system is up to you guys. I mean, I think this is where GuideSpark comes in, Keith, in that you can do it in a way that maybe people haven't thought about enough, because as you know very well, it isn't just one email. It's, I got the email, now I want to understand a little more about that, but I can't finish it right now. I want to come back to it later. And then where did I leave off? And well, what is the other thing I need to know that's adjacent to this? And, oh, I didn't open that email. Maybe I should have, et cetera, et cetera. These are kind of business critical communications now. And given, as you said, the distractions people have at home, there's only so many, things they can do at a given time. So I think companies are struggling with that. Most employees are looking for the signal from their bosses. What do I need to know? Tell me. Because they know there's a lot going on, and they want to know, what's going on at work, what's going on in the company, what's going on with my peers, what's going on with our project. So there's the lines of communication are, and it's interesting, the digital communication mechanisms are so good that we're communicating probably an order of magnitude more now than we did before. It used to be call somebody on the phone, they call you back when they have time, you go to a meeting, you schedule the meeting, people don't show up at the meeting. Now you're just like, boop, we're online, boom, everybody's there.
Look at this. We're living that today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk about a number of things that I think are things that we're starting to see, with companies and customers and people out there, which is thinking about change and transformation as a journey, particularly around communication, which you described as, okay, I have all these other pieces, but from an employee point of view, it's hard when everything is unconnected. And so the more people can start to create and orchestrate these experiences that connect the dots when there's so much information, is how you're going to start to get through. Right? Because otherwise it's just like, think about our consumer world.
Well, it's really sort of a marketing problem. And I know that's your background too. I mean, this is a problem of taking a lot of information and putting it into a form where people know what's important and they can consume it in a meaningful way. And HR departments, sometimes they work with communications groups. Sometimes they have an internal communications group. Sometimes they don't. So it's stressing that part of the HR function a lot.
Yeah. And obviously data has been a key piece of what HR is starting to use. And obviously, as you start to measure things like communication, I think that's going to be really important because, one of the things we always talk about is people communicate, but all they've done is send it. They actually don't know whether they've actually gotten through. And we're seeing a lot of that in this noisy environment.
Well, that's one of the innovations you guys have brought to the market that I think people need to understand is how do we know what percentage of the workforce actually understands or consumed this new policy? It would be nice to know. In the learning market, we have these, sort of standard learning tools for seeing who's completed what courses. But in general, communications and policies, unless you stick a bunch of surveys and assessments at the end of them, you don't know if anybody's reading them. So I think that's a great opportunity for you guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of a crazy time, as you take a step back and think, when you think about this, you've talked about, hey, this was just, something that was going to come after 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
Like, how long do you think we're in this rapid transformation phase where people are trying to figure out?
I think I have a bunch of friends who are economists and we're debating all this job data. I think we needed an economic transformation already. I mean, these are economic transformations that are manifest through company and business transformations. The economic transformation is a whole bunch of things. People are living longer. We have younger people who aren't keeping up with the standard of living. We have people moving to big cities. We have AI and technology advancing at a very rapid rate. Those economic transformations were already going on long before this.
Mhm.
Now we have this new factor added, the sort of the physical health and safety of the virus. We're going to have to deal with these transformations as companies. People are going to consume more content digitally. They're going to want more digital entertainment experiences. They're going to want to go to restaurants and hotels, and they're going to want to go on vacation, but they're going to want to go in a safe way. We can't cram as many people in the airplanes. It was already way too crowded in the airplanes for those of you that travel like me. I don't know how we dealt with it as well long as we did. And this business of big cities and office buildings, I mean, there's a lot of people that are projecting a massive transformation of the commercial real estate market as more people work at home or on remotely. Obviously, that was starting with these things like WeWork, but now we've got to take that to the next level. And maybe people won't want to live in big cities, which is where all the jobs were, which was also another economic problem, because the big cities, if you didn't live in a big city, you couldn't earn any money. And that's one of the reasons we had income inequality. So these were economic stresses already happening that in some ways nature has just said, oh, by the way, there was global warming too. So nature kind of just said, all right, game's up. You're going to have to deal with this stuff now. So we just have to be sort of positive and say, despite the fact that there's a lot of fear and job loss, these are things that to some degree are better for us all in the long run. And each company is doing that in their own special way. And I think while it's very hard to do politically, at an individual company level, it's not that hard. These are smart people in big, important companies all around the world that are quickly figuring out, how do we adapt to this new world, which is becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. I don't think it's just going to suddenly snap back to the way it was before. I think we're going to have this new, what I call low touch way of doing business and going to market. And that will start another economic cycle probably next year. And then we'll move to, a new type of economy that's hopefully more based on trust and health and well-being and empowerment and all the things that we're learning about right now.
One of the things that would be interesting is, you talk to a lot of companies, but what companies, what are a couple of companies who've done incredibly well? What has been key to them doing?
Well, the companies, I mean, there's companies that have obviously done well because they were in the right place at the right time. So if you're selling paper or sanitation products or e-commerce or, Amazon, that. But I'll give you two examples of companies that I talked to that have transformed. So one of the largest healthcare providers in the Northwest discovered, as did all the other healthcare providers, that nobody's coming into the hospital. They don't want to come in. So people are staying home. They're getting sick at home and they're just dealing with it. And the hospitals don't have enough revenue. And so they're kind of like running out of customers. So they've turned on digital health. Digital health was already there. Telemedicine already existed. Now it's getting, with this one company, this big organization in the Northwest said it's 2 orders of magnitude more volume than they had before. So now they're reskilling all of their doctors and nurses and practitioners to, learn how to do care digitally. And it's turning out it works pretty well for most cases, including all the new digital technology that you can, kind of wear at home that monitors various parts of your body. So he basically said, we're not going back. This is a new area of care for us. And we're going to make sure everybody knows how to do it. And we're going to make it better and better and better and buy more tools to advance it further. Second example is in banking. One of the largest banks in Canada shut down 80% of their branches, sent the branch people home, put them on the phone, said, here's an 800 number if you want service, went through the reskilling and training of them, and then found out that the inquiries they were getting were completely different than the inquiries they were getting in the branches. Now people are calling saying, how do I apply for unemployment? What do I do about my medical insurance? How do I rebudget my credit card? Can I take out a loan? Now they're asking for financial advisory support that they didn't used to come into the branch and ask for. So they realized, we kind of have a new business here. Not only are we handling a lot more transactions online, but we're actually in a more of an advisory business than we were before. And so they have tapped into the high wealth advisory group in that bank, and they're teaching them how to build more advisory services for the branch offices all over the country of Canada. So stories like that are coming out all over the place in just about every industry, where companies are finding new ways to deliver their products and services in this new world and keep their employees safe in the process. And some of them are doing great. Now, if you're Disney and your theme parks are closed, there's only so much you can do. But they're doing some creative things to get them back open. And so I think that's why I like to think about this as a business transformation disguised as a crisis.
So when you think about those two examples, my guess is that both of those industries, healthcare wanted to be more digital. The banks wanted to add more value-added services because, more of it was digital. Like, how much do you think it sped up that transformation, though? Because obviously it wouldn't have happened at this rate.
No, it sped it up. It sped it up in two ways. One is the customer demand, peaked very fast. But the other is, instead of sitting around and talking about it and having a strategy session and putting together a 2-year plan, now companies are doing it in a week.
Yeah.
So, I can't tell you how many companies have told me, well, we had a 2-year plan to roll out Microsoft Teams, and then they did it overnight. Or we had a 2-year plan to create an onboarding program for our interns using digital tools. Well, now they're doing it like over the weekend. So, what companies are finding is that some of these projects were a lot easier than they thought once the urgency is there. So, and I think people are excited about that. They're all really jazzed about how quickly their companies can respond. And that's a good thing. And let's hope we remember that when things settle down.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're back to 5-year plans and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, right? And the world is moving so fast, it's hard to think of 5-year plans. So this has been great. I want to just finish up with a couple of things just to kind of get your thoughts on predictions of
Sure.
what might happen. And I'll start with an easy one, which is people have been talking about what happens with remote working, right? Obviously, it's not going to go back to where it was.
Yeah.
Probably not going to be 100%. So where do you think we end up in a couple of years in terms of remote?
I just wrote an article on that. And I think remote work is going through a fad stage right now, where companies are putting out these press releases. You can work remotely forever. You never have to come back to work. We're going to be a full remote company. That's not going to happen. That sounds good. And 51% of the companies we surveyed before the crisis did not have a remote work policy at all. So they all do now. But there are a lot of reasons why you have to come into some office. First of all, only about 29 to 30% of the workforce can work remotely. That's the white collar, highly paid sort of, knowledge workers. A lot of people have to go into a plant or a facility or a store or whatever it is to do their jobs. Yeah. The second thing is, young people in particular don't want to be home all day. They're stuck with roommates. They don't have a lot of space. They don't have fancy offices like I do. So it's not set up for them. They want to be around their friends. They want to build social relationships. The third is a lot of work is done better in groups in physical proximity. When you can get on the whiteboard and you can debate things and you can draw pictures, those are very hard to do online. We're getting better at it, but there's still much better productive experiences like that. And then there's the issue of human interactions, and getting to know people is better done in person. And so leaders and teams generally do have to spend time together at some point during the year, more than, at least once. Onboarding, internships, recruiting, interviewing. There are certain things that really do require face-to-face communications. And so I think companies are going to land in a highly flexible work experience where you can work at home, but you can also come to the office, or you can have a meeting here. And we'll have all sorts of digital tools that'll say, nope, the office is full. You've got to go to this other office until 2:00 in the afternoon, and then you're going to find a spot. I mean, this is what used to happen when I worked for a professional services firm. So I think those kinds of things will happen. But it's a big wake-up call for most companies that they can't, there's a lot of banks that have told me, we have our stock traders working from home now, and actually it's working out okay. We used to have to force them to come to the office, and they had a 2-hour commute into and out of the city, and now they're doing it at home and it's working out all right. So, so most companies are now realizing it's a lot easier and a lot harder than we thought. And it does a lot of things well, but it isn't for everything.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things you said today, you know, and this one touches on, I think, social or emotional or that softer side that I think in this 2 month period where we've all done it, we could all do it and it's been great. But then, you know, a couple months or from now, we're going to go, hey, I missed that. I missed that emotional side of my company or that
Right.
softer side that, you know, is coming through communications, but it is some of that level of interactions that this doesn't.
Well, most companies, I wrote an article on this yesterday. Most companies build beautifully magnificent workplaces as part of their culture. That is part of getting to know the company, is physically being in the office and meeting people. So you've got to figure out how to create that kind of relationship to the company over Zoom or something. It's not the same. So I don't think workplaces are going to disappear, but most companies I've realized they didn't need quite as much space as they had, and they need to reorganize things quite a bit.
All right, one last one. Any crazy predictions for the future that you want to leave everybody with in terms of things that you're thinking about for what's going to happen?
I think the biggest story to think about as a business person or as an individual or an HR person is the connectedness that we have to each other in the middle of this pandemic, and try to keep that. You know, you go walking around your neighborhood with your mask on and people say hi. We're all worried about the same things. We all have the same concerns about our jobs and our workplaces. We're globally connected in a way we weren't before. And also the climate is getting better. The roads are a little less crowded. The air is a little bit cleaner. The trees are a little bit greener. I'm certainly noticing this where I live. So let's all try to remember some of these positive things that have happened here. The virus is just a chemical. It's a chemical thing that turns into a human, obviously a damaging human virus. But in some ways, there's a positive to this, and so I do hope that we can come out of this with some, positive things out of it. People are telling stories about now how during the, people that lived through the recession, the depression, never learned how to spend money again. We're probably going to all walk away with some scars from this, but maybe one of the positive scars is we'll feel more connected to each other as a result, because we're all human and we're all going through it at the exact same, in the exact same way, no matter where we are. So that's a little bit of my thinking about what's going to come out of all this.
Josh, that's a great way to end this, because as you know, we're calling this the Connected Enterprise. And so I think that all ties together. That was actually unprompted, so it was a great way to end this session. So thank you very much. It was great
Thank you, Keith.
to have this discussion and hopefully have the audience get some perspective on what's going on out there. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Really appreciate it.
Sure.